There once was someone who did such amazing things and who said such wonderful things that people decided to follow. When they followed, they would ask questions. And once they asked, "Who are you?" And he responded, "I am the light." In God we live, in God we move, we are in God. In God we live, in God we move, we are in God. Prophets are people who come so close to God, and God comes so close to them, that they can't help but understand what God wants them to do or say. This is the story of the prophet Miriam. Miriam's story is a story of water. Miriam is a prophet of water. Through water, God saved the people of Israel. Miriam was born in the land of Egypt. It was many years after Joseph had died, and there was a new Pharaoh who ruled Egypt. He had forgotten what Joseph had done, and he trapped the people of Israel, Miriam's people. They could not go home. They were enslaved. Pharaoh was afraid of the people of Israel becoming strong. And so he ordered all of the baby boys of the people of Israel to be killed. But the people of Israel were strong anyway, and their strength was in certain women. The prophet Miriam was one of these women, and so was her mother. Her mother gave birth to a baby boy, and she did not want him to be killed. And so she placed him in a basket, and she covered him with grass and reeds to keep him safe. She placed him in the river Nile, and she asked Miriam to watch over as the basket floated down the river. And Miriam knew what she was to do. She watched. She watched as the basket was drawn from the river by the Pharaoh's daughter. And she knew what she had to do. Miriam spoke to Pharaoh's daughter and said, "I can find someone to nurse this baby for you." And Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam fetched her very own mother to nurse the baby. And the baby grew as a member of Pharaoh's household, and Pharaoh's daughter called the baby Moses, because she had drawn him from the water. Miriam grew up with the people of Israel in Egypt. They were her people, and she was their prophet. And she was with them when Moses went to Pharaoh and asked Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go, and Pharaoh said no. Moses asked again and again, and every time Pharaoh said no. And Miriam was there when, one last time, Moses asked Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go, and instead of saying no, Pharaoh said yes. And Miriam was with the people of Israel. Moses led them out of Egypt, and as they reached the water of the Sea of Reeds, they heard Pharaoh's army behind them, chasing them, and they were afraid. They did not want to go back to Egypt and into slavery. And God came so close to Moses, and Moses came so close to God, that Moses knew just what to do. And he spread his hands out over the sea and parted the seas. And Miriam was there as the people of Israel walked through the Sea of Reeds on dry land. And once everyone had reached the other side, the waters closed behind them, and the waters protected them from Pharaoh's army. When they were safe on the other side, Miriam led the women of Israel, in a dance and a song of celebration, for God had saved them by leading them through the waters. Miriam and the people of Israel journeyed in the desert, and the water came with them. God gave gifts to Miriam and each of her siblings to help and protect the people of Israel on their journey. To Aaron, Miriam's brother, God gave the pillar of cloud that would lead them. And to Moses, God gave the manna, which spread out on the ground and fed the people of Israel. And to Miriam, God gave the well, the water which kept the people of Israel from being thirsty in the desert. Once on their journey in the desert, Miriam became very sick. When people were sick on the journey in the desert, they left the main camp and they went into a special tent outside so that nobody else in the main camp would become sick. The people of Israel the main camp was going to move on. But the people of Israel loved Miriam. She was their prophet. And they refused to move on until she was well again. They waited for her to be better. They waited 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And after 7 days, Miriam's sickness was healed, and they continued on. They reached a place called Kadesh, and Miriam died, and she was buried there. And the sorrow of the people of Israel was great. And Miriam's well dried up. And the people of Israel's grief was like their thirst for the water of Miriam's well. I wonder what your favorite part of this story is. I wonder what the most important part of this story might be. I wonder what part of this story is especially for you, or where you are in this story. I wonder what part of this story we could leave out and still have all the story that we need.